Welcome to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. I'm Bob Ambrogi, and on today's show, we're exploring how artificial intelligence is reshaping the practice of personal injury law. Joining me are two guests who are at the intersection of this transformation. Zhou, the co-founder and CEO of Supio, an AI-powered platform built specifically for PI lawyers. Just last month, Supio raised $60 million in a Series B round, bringing its total funding to $91 million, all to drive development of its platform that helps PI firms organize, analyze, and prepare their cases. Also joining me is Tyler Schneider, managing partner of the personal injury law firm TorHoerman Law, and an early adopter of Supio. Together, we're going to unpack how this technology works, why it matters, and what it means for the future of personal injury practice. But before we get to any of that, please take a moment to learn about the sponsors who so generously support this podcast. Mira's case empowers workers' compensation, employment and labor, and insurance defense firms to run a successful law firm with innovative features built for your specialized practice. From client intake and document management, time tracking and billing, online payment reconciliation, and more, Mira's case has helped many law firms reduce administrative tasks and increase productivity. Run a more efficient and successful law firm with Mira's case. Learn more by visiting mirascase.com. That's MERUS case.com. Do it today. Now let's get to today's conversation. You didn't go to law school to waste time writing and responding to discovery requests. Never waste time on discovery again with BriefPoint. BriefPoint drafts your discovery responses and requests for documents within minutes of your first sign-in. BriefPoint is the most reliable discovery drafting solution on the market, and it works right out of the box. Get your first document drafted by going to briefpoint.ai and clicking Get Started. No credit card required. BriefPoint. Draft what matters, automate the rest. Jerry and Tyler, welcome to the show. Happy to talk to you guys today.
Bob.
Jerry, I'm going to start with you because hoping you can give me a little bit of the backstory here in terms of what led you to create Supio and why focus on personal injury law in particular?
Yeah, when we started Supio during COVID, we kind of sat down to Starbucks with my co-founder and we wrote down all the problems that pissed us off in the world, literally. And we just wrote them all down. And being kind of first generation immigrants, we always had to interface with the law for our parents. And we were just it's a terrible user experience. We should go and try to improve it. It's a very typical, very developer type of thought process. And then as we explored law, we quickly realized this isn't just a vertical, it's a huge industry. And every single type of lawyer practices differently. And then one day I was giving a talk around designing document interfaces for automation at a little place in Florida. And, there was so much engagement actually from the group of lawyers. And it turns out that they're all personal injury and plaintiff lawyers. And, that's kind of how we realized that it's such a great market and place to start. Not only are you helping folks, it's also very aligned with how lawyers think about, winning and outcomes versus just, the billable hour. So that's how Supio got started.
And Tyler, let me ask you, first of all, tell me a little bit about your firm, TorHoerman, and what was it that kind of led you to even think about a tool like Supio?
My name is Tyler Schneider, and I'm the managing partner at TorHoerman Law. We do injury law. We do everything from mass torts, which is our bread and butter, to class actions, to catastrophic car accidents, motorcycle accidents, negligent security, the whole gambit. I met Jerry through a mutual friend at a conference, and what we were struggling with was the idea of, this whole AI concept and everything and all that has blown up, and it's almost become diluted. But we were cognizant of the idea that if we didn't get ahead of it, we'd be far behind. right? Like if you don't figure out what you're going to do going forward in this space, 6 months goes by, you're 3 years behind. And so when we started talking with Jerry, he had a very easy concept to like approach. And it was a very smart idea of like how to take these mass cases and kind of distill them down to exactly what we're looking for. And it's something we've always done basically by human process. And so the idea that one, we could potentially do something we've always done better, but also do it faster and become less reactive, I guess is the best word. Because that's the difficulty in this landscape is like you always feel reactive. You feel like you're making progress, and then let's say a settlement might be coming down the pipe. It's close. Well, then you take a look at what you have, and you're like, wow, we really need to ramp up. We got to get these. We've been struggling to get this. We've been struggling to do this, and we've been teetering along, and we're making progress, but we never really went on the interstate and flew 65. So that kind of led us to having a bigger conversation and then teasing it out. And then as we teased it out, we started, Jerry started kind of giving me more ideas of how we could use it. And then we had a major trial coming up. And that's where we kind of really tapped into beyond the large landscape.
So I'm curious about that because, I hear you say that you've kind of heard about AI, and it seems like part of it was just wanting to get ahead of it or ride the crest of the wave, perhaps a little bit. It struck me, and Jerry, I might have talked to you about this at some point, but it struck me that personal injury law in particular was an area of law practice that kind of hadn't been well served by a lot of technologies until AI came along. And so, Tyler, I'm kind of curious about your thoughts on that, given that you do practice in this area. What did you kind of see the potential for AI before you started using it to make some difference in what you do?
We started dabbling in some other systems when we were doing like communications with potential clients, right? Using algorithms to direct them to the right information that could lead them to questions that could help us determine early on if they were going to be like a client that we could take on. And so we had started to dabble in that. We work a lot with another company called Simply Convert. We were teasing out things, and there was different needs. And, it's funny to digress a bit. Bob, you're right. Like this is kind of been an archaic practice. I still know guys that do dictation. I know guys who are amazing trial lawyers. And if you walk in their office, every single piece of paper is printed out. And the way that they save their files is just on a My Documents on their desktop. And that, the thing is that it's worked. People have still been successful. So there wasn't a lot of change. But the truth is like when you get into mass torts and you get into volume and you start doing things like that, you have to separate those two landscapes. You have to separate the client world and the progress of that and some of the lawyering stuff. Some of it still is going to be old school methodology. But once we started seeing like little things and as this AI started to develop and we started to tease things out with Jerry and we started to see how we could be better and we could start doing nuances, it was more of a, hey, we can really target and push this forward the way we want rather than let's see how it plays out and we respond. Figuring out your cases that you want to push forward, you want to prioritize your bellwether cases, that takes an early view of your data of who, where your cases are, who they are, what are the circumstances. And just being able to find like this software that like can kind of help us fine tune that early on. It's given us an advantage. And I think you're right. It's something that's been done in all these other industries. And people just are familiar with what they do and they didn't want to change.
Yeah. Jerry, can you maybe give us a kind of a clearer picture of what it is exactly you do for personal injury law firms? What does Supio do?
We start with just a really simple idea, which is asking the question of what if you can answer anything you want about a case? And if you kind of understand what that means, it really is around the information inside documents. And traditionally, in personal injury, probably about 70-80% of all this data is medical. So getting really good at understanding medical records is one of our core competencies. And as you expand beyond medical, you get the idea that, litigations actually happen in pretty structured ways. And, there's almost like a tree that starts forming around all the different types of documents, the responses, the motions. So you can start structuring and understanding this. And by doing all this work, you can tie it together into what we call like a knowledge graph. And we can retrieve information in really reliable ways that are as good as people sometimes. And we can find insights that are hard to form, especially at larger data sets, right? So by helping folks, we can kind of continuously increase the fidelity of this and get more and more accurate and deeper into these complex litigations in ways that can perhaps give an advantage in these types of trials.
Bob, can I expand on that? The one thing I want to say, because when you listen to these podcasts, sometimes people are always talking broadly, and you're like, what did they really do?
Yeah.
So if I give you an example, like when we went into our trial in July, we had a child who had over 43,000 pages of medical records. Okay, she had extensive medical history, a ton of treatment, and these records are complicated because in a NICU, because this was a baby, a lot of times they copy and paste everything from the preceding treatment or physician visit, and it's just copy and paste, and then there'll be like a little snippet of something new. And so if we go the traditional approach, which is how we started, we had a nurse consultant take the first crack at it. But even if you distill 43,000 pages down to 10%, you got a 4,300 page summary, right? And so this is like, it's the King James translation of this massive amount of data. And then you're going through that. And then you're trying to like whittle down, but it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of hours, and it's really, really expensive. So with Jerry, we took all these medical records and we put them in. And Supio was then able to branch it into different categories and subcategories. So now I can take the data, I can read a timeline, but also I can say, hey, I need all of Dr. Jones' visits. And I can click on a button, and now I'm just seeing Dr. Jones' chronology of that patient. But even more so, I can separate from the doctors, and I can say, you know what, I really want to focus in all the times that they were looking at like cardiology. When were they looking at this child's heart? Or when were they looking at, this child's lungs? And so I could segment into those specific categories. And so now we were getting into these nuanced things, and where it really kind of blossomed for us as we were preparing and in trial is like, okay, I need to know every time that this child was measured and weighed and every physical therapy note. And had we had to do that the old way, somebody would have went to that 4,300 page document and been like, okay, highlight, copy, paste, put it into this. But we could do it in real time, right? And so just being able to be proactive, being able to build against some of the things that they were bringing into the trial, and like taking it each nuance to another nuance was invaluable.
So is it entirely a matter of saving the intensive time that would be required of going through all these records, or does it give you insights into the records that you might not otherwise have found?
Yeah, so it's a great question, right? So if you're doing it the old school model, you're probably like all of us, right? Like when you think of a question, then it derives another question, and you start thinking, okay, well, these are good. She was good, the patient was good on these dates, and she was seeing this treater. Oh, but this treater also mentions audiology, like they were doing audio tests that'll show brain function. Maybe we should look at those, and then look at those. And so typically 5 years ago, I would have made a note, and I would have had this running list of the things I want to go back through, and then kind of have somebody piece it all together. But here, we could do it in real time, and we could start merging the questions. Okay, so, hey, take this, and this, and tell me the chronology of all these times the patient showed that she was doing well. And you keep going. And then it's like everything else. Once the wheels start turning, you really start playing, and you're like, okay, now I want to look at this. And, oh, okay, since we can put it together faster, I'm not cutting things off the list. I'm not saying, well, that's going to take forever. If I do every feeding thing, we'll deal with that later if we need it. And I could start actually putting it together, and I start putting together ideas, and then it's not even, I keep using the word reactive, but we're not being reactive to just what the defendants are presenting. We're starting to say, okay, if they go this way, we've already prepared this outline of how we can challenge it and the pieces of the story that'll rebut it. So that was the advantage. It allows us to be more creative because we're faster.
Jerry, I know that you and Kyle formed the company in 2021 and worked on developing this product. As you started to work with lawyers like Tyler, were there things you learned from their experiences that went into your continued development or refinement of the product as you were working on it?
I think it's that's the only way to build the product, right? We partner with folks like Tyler who are, at the peak of their craft, and we learn from them what they're trying to do with the product. And even today, before we got on this podcast, we were chatting about some of the new features we were having in the upcoming trials they're going to do, and trying to figure out how to distill those into deeper queries into the system, right? And ultimately, by kind of joining the craft of understanding how to leverage computers with the practice of law, I think that's the only way you can build a platform that can help attorneys like Tyler.
So were there any particular surprises as you kind of took the product that you had conceived of and started to apply it to the real world situation of the practice of law? Was there anything that
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, like a great start is like when we started leveraging generative AI, especially like the conversational piece that we had, we really thought about it as like answering questions, right? Like you can, you want to know something about the case, and then you start answering that, and then very quickly we started seeing like these lawyers forming really complex prompts, and then they drop them in, and we're trying to figure out what they're doing. And then we quickly realized like you evolve from answering a question to understanding whether there's like a violation of standard of care inside a nursing home, right? And then so there's now analysis, and then from there people figured out how to take those prompts, and then not only do you get the analysis, how do you channel it into a work product, like a document you're trying to go create. So, in some ways, because we keep the platform pretty open in terms of the conversations you can have with a little bit of guidance, you can see the creativity really come through. And then that helps us focus in on like really big pain points, or even understanding like areas where we really fall short that we can go, right? The whole like trap of conversational AI is that you can literally ask anything. And some things it's really good at answering, and some things it's not. And we kind of see attorneys, they start forming patterns where they work around things, right? Like even it's I've heard the saying like it's like kind of guiding like a junior attorney, where you can't ask a really complex question because it won't get the answer, but you can definitely ask like a series of more basic questions. So that kind of led us to like, hey, this is chain of thought. Right? We're matching these patterns against the latest in generative AI, and then we can merge this together. So every, a few months, I'll just like suddenly call Tyler. I'll be like, hey, check out this product. And then, within a few days, he'll give me a bunch of feedback, and then we kind of understand the pain points, and we'll continue to iterate. And I think this isn't a process that ends. It just goes on for as long as we can continue to partner with these folks.
So many attorneys that I talk to still retain a lot of skepticism around using AI in their practices, retain a lot of fear about using AI in their practices. So Tyler, was there ever a conversation in your firm about that? And if so, how did that play out?
Yeah, no, that conversation happens continually. So the truth is you still have to be a lawyer. Mm-hmm. And so the things that we emphasize over and over and over is to fact check it. And the way that I always explain it, especially when I was teaching like our younger associates, because they're the quicker ones to become more dependent on it, is you use it as a guide, right? Because sometimes like the hardest part of writing, if you're writing a novel, is starting to put pen to paper and just start writing. use it to help you get that outline, that initial start, to know where to look things, and then do what a lawyer does. Double check it, fact check it, go look at the records that it's referencing. It's a wonderful tool to be able to say, give me all of, these points of data, and it spits out 86. But if you just accept the 86, you're putting yourself at risk. You should go through and start, looking at them. And that's still a huge time saving. But I think that skepticism comes from people that think like this is going to be the only way that I do it. Once I do it, whatever it tells me, that is the book of truth. And you can't have that. You still have to check it, because there will be moments where the AI makes a mistake within itself, or the AI misses something, or there's a record that was blurred and didn't OCR correctly, and a handwritten note. Right now, I think that's unavoidable. So you use it as a tool. That's how we approach it. That's the way that I reemphasize. I think we've all gotten so used to, you can see when somebody sends you a message that's ChatGPT. You get a message with random bolded words and bullet points and certain phrases, and
M dashes, right? That's the new.
Yeah.
That's the new TI.
And we've just, we've been really aggressive with pushing that in our office, that you can't have that as the end all. There has to be a secondary step. There has to be a review. There has to be a polish. And right now, I have no reason to think otherwise. So I understand the skepticism. I also, you have to find the right tool that works for you. I was explaining this to my wife. I kind of feel like, and Jerry, I don't mean this in a bad way, but I kind of feel like AI software is like when we all got rid of cable and we cut the cord, and then we switched to streaming platforms. And now we've got like 46 and you don't know what to watch on which one. And you watch this one and you really like it. And then they're like, but our ad-free version or our upgraded version with this, you know what I mean? So it's like, it is getting a little bit like exhausting, I guess, is in that sense. So it's better to narrow in and find what works for you.
Yeah.
It's like the way you can look at, like, every single time a new technology comes out, right? People are forced to build a relationship with the technology. Like, back in the day, I worked for Exchange for a while, and we think about email when it came out. There's like these people, Nigerian princes, that send you emails telling you that you're going to get a lot of money, and then you end up ignoring it. And eventually, the product evolved into understanding what is spam and what is not spam. And every now and then, Nigerian prince will still get through and send you an email. When you think about the internet and all the sources that are coming out, right, you kind of have to understand, where you're reading and who actually wrote the article. And generative AI is at that moment right now where we're starting to evolve, and we're helping people build that relationship with the technology where they get better about it. But we also are trying to mitigate some of the downsides of what token prediction and probability is actually doing with all these words that are coming out on the screen.
Coming up in just a moment, Tyler's going to share more about how Supio is changing the way his mass tort PI firm handles depositions and legal analysis. And Jerry will talk more about what's next for the Supio platform. But first, please take this opportunity to learn about the sponsors whose generosity keeps this podcast running. Experience the next generation of legal technology with Paradigm. Its platforms, Practice Panther, Mariscase, Lolly Law, Bill for Time, and TrustBooks, offer lawyers the ultimate toolkit for success across various practice areas and business needs. Whether you require comprehensive practice management platforms, native online payment solutions, or robust legal accounting software, Paradigm is the one-stop shop for law firms of all sizes and practices. Discover the Paradigm difference at joinparadigm.com. In an ever-evolving legal market, there's one thing that stands the test of time: great client service. That's where Lex Reception comes in. Their agents are available 24/7, 365 days a year to answer calls, qualified leads, onboard new clients, and schedule appointments. With bilingual agents and software that can seamlessly integrate with your current workflow, you'll never miss a call or future case. With over 12 years of experience, Lex Reception gives lawyers the time and freedom to focus on core legal work and helps them grow their firms, all while building their reputation for great client service. Check them out today at lexreception.com. Welcome back to LawNext. I'm speaking with Zhou, co-founder and CEO of AI platform Supio, and Tyler Schneider, managing partner of TorHoerman Law and one of Supio's customers. Before the break, Tyler shared a real-world example of Supio in action during a complex medical case. As we return, we pick up from there as I ask him how he and his firm have incorporated the platform more broadly into their workflows. As we return, I pick up there as I ask him how he and his firm have incorporated the platform more broadly into their workflows. Let's get back to that. Tyler, you talked about this one case with the infant in the NICU. I don't know if that was at the Abbott Lab. I read about it. You were being worked on an Abbott Labs case. I don't know if that was the one you were talking about.
Case, yeah.
So have you now incorporated Supio more natively into your workflows on your other cases? And if so, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you're doing that.
So in that case, we were, I guess in a way, Jerry can correct me, but like it was kind of a beta. We were testing out some new things that were happening. I felt like they were happening as we were, in real time. That was pretty medical oriented. We do have a series of different trials, another one against Abbott, one involving a sterilization plant, and some others for exposure. And we're testing it out in a different way. So like in this one, now we're expanding a little bit into the legal side. So, if you have a case where the corporate witness has been deposed 7 times, right? Using the system to analyze those 7 depositions and start trying to look at like contradictions, things that they changed, nuances in their answers, frameworks of how they answer questions. If you had, for example, in the Abbott case, there's a ton of depositions. If you have 86 depositions at 7 hours each, you got 602 hours of depositions. And it is a impossible task, even if you had somebody go through and kind of do a summary of each. When you're writing a opposition to a summary judgment, to be like, hey, I need to know every time that they said they didn't have to warn because the FDA, has this guidance. And if you try to piece that together, it's just exhausting for ultimately what is probably going to be a paragraph or 6 sentences in an opposition. So we're using it to kind of look at the whole landscape of testimony, including things that they often put in their motions, right? People don't always realize it, but when you're doing an opposition to like a summary judgment, there might have been a time 2 years ago where they filed a motion for sanctions, and they took a really aggressive approach, and they put a statement in there that completely contradicts the position they're trying to do now. And it's really nice to isolate that because honestly, 5 years ago, I can't tell you that when I'm doing this summary judgment, I would have looked at motion 1 of 842 2 years prior and looked at page 6. So that is one way we're doing it. The other way we've been teasing out, this is what Jerry and I were just talking about, is once you get that testimony, you get evidence, you get reports, you can start looking at their affirmative defenses, and you can start isolating the components of those affirmative defenses and giving it like a guide, like a tool. Tell me, what is the things that stick out to you that really rebut this affirmative defense of comparative fault? Or, this affirmative defense of preemption? Is there statements that contradict that? That's kind of the evolving stage that we're moving into and teasing out.
Again, we talked earlier about the ability to be more efficient in reviewing documents to get new insights out of documents. Do you think this ultimately makes a difference in the outcomes in cases in which you're using it?
Yeah, I think it ultimately it makes us move faster, because sometimes you would get really, really slogged down because you get a dump of a terabyte of documents, right? So you can analyze, you can respond to motions faster because you can synthesize data faster. So maybe you don't do that extra, hey, we need another 30 days, let's get an extension. When you're being proactive, you can already start thinking about, like, okay, if we go into a bellwether system, what is some of the things we want to look at in medical? What are the kind of clients, the specific injuries that we want to kind of analyze? Does it make a difference in outcome? I think it has to. Anytime you're doing something better, it's got to have some kind of impact on the ultimate end result. And I'm completely cognizant that on the other side, they're probably doing the same thing. So
Not
we speed up.
necessarily.
Well, yeah, maybe after they watch this, right? But it's like anything else, though. In my mind, at least, I'm telling myself, when you speed up to 75, the car on your left is going to speed up to stay, in tune. So, do I think your short end is, yeah? I mean, if you're doing something better, ultimately it has to impact the end result, and hopefully, it also helps us on some things like a nuance we would have missed. But I do want to stay grounded in the sense that, like, there is a guy in my office still who he can't help himself. He's a monster. His name's Chad. He's our science guru. He will go through every page still, right? He's still going to go through because that's how his system, that's how he works. But then once you go through it, to be able to use these tools to then synthesize back to specific moments, he's laid his groundwork. He's got his baseline. And now his ability to recover and pull and push and create is just better.
Jerry, last month, your company announced that it had raised $60 million. You had previously raised some $31 million. So I think you're roughly at about $91 million now that you've raised a respectable amount. And what does that mean for lawyers such as Tyler? How is that going to change what you do? How do you plan to make the product better, improve it, develop it? What does this funding mean for your customers?
Yeah, I think both us and our investors are really excited about folks like Tyler in this market, right? It's like you're right that probably 5 years ago, this people haven't really focused this much here, and I think it's really because the technology wasn't around to be able to help trial attorneys. So for us, a lot of this is going back into R&D. We can parallelize a lot more of the types of work we can do. We can incorporate much deeper analysis and be more proactive in helping with insights, right? We're currently trying to triple our engineering team. We're opening a new office in the Bay Area. So we think that, this is something with the right partnership with practitioners like Tyler, we can help them transform how trial law is done.
Tyler, if I weren't here and you were just sitting here talking to Jerry, what would you tell him the product is missing that it really needs?
Jerry, you want me to do this? No.
Yeah. There's so much of it. I mean, like, I think it's totally like, this is what we chat about. So,
No, the thing we've talked about is figuring out the way to make various systems cohesively live together, right? Because what Jerry has is an amazing tool, but it's one tool in the toolbox, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps expanding.
That cable
right?
TV problem you were talking about before.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so, like, there are other tools that Jerry's never going to want to develop, right? Like, he's never going to want to go into that market. And for us to be better somehow, we need those things to cohesively communicate to each other and exchange data and be able to take some of the insights that Jerry's software can develop and put it into something else that I can do different analytics, right? And that's the biggest struggle, I think, a little bit, is like, you've got all these apps, but they don't really communicate to each other necessarily. It seems like it's getting better and we're getting closer to it, but that's the biggest thing, and there's all these nuances, right? Like, you could have, so Jerry has a business. Jerry has to bill. billing comes in a certain way. Getting like billing to be cohesive with like how we do accounting. And then having that communicate to our system where we do client management so we know what our running tally is on case costs. They all kind of live together, but they're in different rooms, if that makes sense. And getting that, like, I don't know, developing a family room is what I would like to see.
Jerry, is that kind of stuff on your roadmap? And what else is on your roadmap?
There's a lot. I think building integrations and accessing more data as well as like putting it back into the systems of record is a key one for us. One thing we've always been inspired by, and I think something that we can really connect with attorneys on is we look at, for example, how generative AI is helping software engineering, right? There's these tools like Cursor, Windsurf, like GitHub Copilot. And we think about how we can really start evolving toward that level of a Copilot that not only helps you understand your cases, but it helps you Copilot your drafting, right? So I know that we're currently, we've released document intelligence platform, and now we're helping attorneys with this process. And there's so much to do there, I think, that can help not only with what we're doing with just answering your question, but understanding your historical work product, right? Your habits, personalizing into a system that can intuitively know who you are and works with you versus forcing someone like Tyler to have to reset every single time there's a new case. And I think that's going to be really interesting as we start releasing more of these personalization features in the upcoming quarters.
Do you stay focused on personal injury law, or do you expand into other areas?
We're very focused on personal injury law for now, and we're I think we haven't even accomplished what we've set out to do, which is to transform this part of law, and we can talk about the next one when we're done with this one in a few years, Bob. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds good. Again, I talked earlier about my sense that in some ways this area of law practice hadn't been all that well served by technology in the past, and then over the last couple of years with the advent of generative AI, it seems that there have been several products that have come along. So I mean, Supio is not alone in serving personal injury practices now. There are other platforms out there that are applying AI to this practice. So I imagine you get this question sometimes, Jerry, of why Supio? What distinguishes you from some of the other products that are out there serving this same market? And what do you say to people when they ask you that?
I think we approach it very differently, right? We were first to come out of stealth to bring generative AI to personal injury. This was back in the summer of last year. There are lots of AI products in general. There's products that can help you with claims and draft demand letters, and we can do all of that. But ultimately, what does it mean for generative AI to help Tyler is kind of how we think about this versus, the larger like firm or business, right? I think it's really focused on the practitioners.
Tyler, what are your thoughts on where this goes in terms of personal injury law? I mean, what do you think the impact of artificial intelligence, technology broadly, tools such as Supio are going to be, and how is personal injury law practice going to be different maybe in 5 years down the road or something?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. I was like, you think about like when cell phones like started really emerging as smartphones, right? We didn't have any concept of how far it would go, right? At first, it was like more advanced text messages, and then all of a sudden it was email, and then all of a sudden it was the apps keep developing. I think that it depends on the market, right? So your high volume personal injury firms, the ones that do a ton of car crashes and rear enders, right? They should, if they're utilizing it, become more efficient, right? They can process faster. They can get a better understanding early on, and they can develop kind of rhythms, new rhythms, I guess, in a sense. So I think that's one market that's definitely going to get better. And then as this develops and we get into more like, we've already evolved into ESI a lot, right? Especially in like document production. But as it gets better, I think we're going to see lawyers be able to like really kind of develop storylines and themes. Some of the stuff that might have got lost in nuance, right? Like, so you might have like a phrase, right? Like, let's think, this is a very John Grisham example, but like you might have like some vague phrase that's used a lot in email communications that you would never really pay attention to, because it's spread out over thousands and thousands of emails. But once you start, like, a system can kind of analyze and start seeing it, and it interprets it in a certain way, you might say, oh, wow, wait, hold on. This is the phrase that they're using to refer to this clinical study that they kind of put under the rug. And we've done that as lawyers. Like, that's not like necessarily something new. You can go back to like early pharmaceutical cases. People learn things, but I think that we'll get better about it. What worries me, Bob, is like as we evolve to get better, the other side does too. I mean, I'm not trying to sound too pessimistic, but like companies are going to get better about, like, this is not the stuff that is in an email. This is a phone call. This is like, they've already done that stuff. And so like there will be, more and more development. The truth is, it's like, as this evolves, yes, we get better, but then it's also going to be harder. You know what I mean? Like, some of the other stuff that we do is going to become harder. So you have to have better tools.
Right. Well, and in a lot of cases, that other side, the defense side, may be better funded as well, and be able to afford more sophisticated tools than some PI practices might be able to handle.
Oh, yeah. We'll always be outnumbered in that regard in some capacity. I mean, it's just hard, but I don't know. Maybe that's why I think we're better.
Absolutely. Jerry, what about you? You have thoughts on how this might evolve or transform personal injury practice going forward?
Yeah. When I look at what's coming up in the roadmap, right, it's really, I think, going from something that's really passive, that you have to come in and you have to ask questions and you have to get answers, to really a thinking partner. When we think about concepts like chain of thought, right, where you can have a sequence of actions that are really open-ended, or when we think about agents, which is really, you give this AI some problem to solve, and it goes in and just like spends hours trying to think about this problem. I think like practitioners end up having to evolve themselves to leverage these types of tools to some of the, like when I think about like the work that Tyler and his team does, right? It's like the human bottleneck is very real, where like you can go chase one thing at a time. And, the AI doesn't have that bottleneck. The scale is there, right? So it's just the limit of computing. So you can parallelize a lot of stuff. And if you can parallelize and you can automate what you want to parallelize, then you're going to be able to find a lot more insights a lot quicker. And you can really probably even upfront make much better decisions right when you decide to take a case all the way to trial.
One thing, Bob, that I think about is like, I'll be curious to see as time progresses if it expands kind of what law firms do. And what I mean by that is, like, if Dave Smith down the road always did car accidents, but now he has technology and capability to really synthesize and analyze a medical malpractice case. Does he keep that in-house now instead of referring that to, his buddy down the street who exclusively did med mal? And I think some of that will become interesting. I think still people have their comfort zones. So maybe it'll be better if Dave Smith might not have taken that case at all, but now he can look at it and have, a general understanding and see that there's something there, and he's going to refer that out. But that'll be the interesting thing. I mean, one thing I take comfort in is that they haven't figured out a way yet to like have robotic trial lawyers. They can't put Matthew McConaughey's avatar out there. So being actually somebody like a firm that does trials, that's not challenged yet. Although I did see that video of, I don't know if you guys saw it, of a sentencing hearing
Yeah.
where they put the person who passed, the deceased, up on an AI video,
Right.
and he communicated. That kind of freaked me out. I thought
It was
it was
disturbing.
cool, but I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I don't know
I
where,
was a little surprised they let that go. But
Yeah.
yeah. Well, hopefully Jerry's not working on robotic lawyers to replace you yet.
Yeah.
Give him a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Tyler, we're making a friend for you. I think that's the way to think about it.
I need a robotic therapist. There you go.
100%. So.
That was pretty much all the questions I had, but I always like to give my guests an opportunity to add anything else that we haven't talked about that they think is worth bringing up here. Tyler, I'll start with you. Is there anything else that you kind of want to say about this that we haven't talked about?
I got a question for Jerry. Jerry, when you and Kyle made that list of all the problems in the world and the things you hate, what was number 2?
Oh my God. I'm trying to think of a lot of the problems we had at the time, outside of like the ones we've encountered in society, were really around like software, right, and documents and how we solve these. And ultimately, like I think all of it kind of merges into one. So, without getting too technical, we always thought that like we worked on a decent amount of like search concepts, right? So, search was like not very good at the time. So but what's funny about that is like, if you think about search and you think about the problems we solve today, fundamentally, there's still like technology problems around search. So we're back where we started, and we're still trying to like find information in a way that can help knowledge workers, essentially. And to kind of add to this, I think like when you think about problems around AI, there's really 2 types of problems out there. There's like these foundation model companies that are trying to basically upgrade the processor. They're constantly trying to make this foundation model much more powerful, and it can, handle more memory. It can go and it's more accurate in its responses. And then there's companies like ours, which, we focus on being able to present the information correctly, sequence things, right? How do you actually go and understand what is the right information to present to LLM in order for it to answer the question appropriately? So, and it actually gets really interesting because, as we kind of go really deep into exactly what Tyler was giving an example about, which is like, hey, you want to understand the standard of care violation in like a birth injury case, right? It's the birth injury case actually has like a relatively finite set of possibilities there. What's really hard is like you give them a stack of documents and you're trying to understand like fetal heart rate inside a medical record. So if you give it the standard of care and you give it the fetal heart rate in the flow sheets, is the model nuanced enough to be able to pick that out and understand the differences, right? So this is kind of the business we're in, which is, how do we break this down into the atomic elements and try to teach these models to be able to give the outputs we expect. And if you can do that, then you kind of unleash this scale of productivity that's been this problem for these types of cases.
And we didn't really get into this, but you and your co-founder, this is not your first technology rodeo, so to speak. And when you sat down and sketched out that napkin in the Starbucks, you had some experience under your belts that you were working on at that point.
Yeah, 100%. So
hopefully you have a framed Starbucks napkin somewhere in your offices.
The first dollar. Yeah, that was a good answer, Jerry. There was a little part of me though that was like, this number 2 was Ticketmaster fees, and number 3 was evaporating people who honk at green lights.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Tempted to say bringing back cigarettes, but then I'd have to explain that. So we'll skip that one.
That's for a different podcast, Bob.
Okay. All right. Jerry, was there anything else that you wanted to bring up that we hadn't talked about other than what you just did?
Well, I think it's an exciting time to be both in technology and to be a lawyer, right? And for those out there listening who are on the fence, like come talk to us, try Supio, try other platforms. I think when I look at people who work with words is really the industry that I think about. For the longest time, there hasn't been any technology that can help people like shape concepts and work with words and do all of this. And it's the equivalent of like inventing the spreadsheet, right? It's like this is going to change the landscape of how the legal industry works.
Yeah. Well, Jerry and Tyler, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciated it and enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks,
Cool.
Bob.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us for today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to share your own thoughts or comments, please do so by messaging us on LinkedIn or other social media, or just email me directly at ambrogi@gmail.com. If you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review wherever you get the show. If you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review wherever you get the show. LawNext is a production of LawNext Media. I'm Bob Ambrogi. Hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of LawNext.